Welcome, everybody. I am Paul Wickover, the Associate Dean of the Online MFA, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Jacob Powers, the Associate Dean of the Online MA and BA Programs in Creative Writing. This is our Instructor Spotlight event, which is something we have every year. We're very thrilled tonight to be welcoming two of our instructors who are successful writers in their own right. We're proud to have Dan Gleason, who teaches in SNU's online MFA, online MA, in creative writing, and Tracy Crow, who teaches in the online MFA, as our guest tonight. It looks like our guest, Dan, is back.
Yes, but we're going to go ahead
stick with having Tracy. Okay, perfect. Yep. Okay, so our first guest is going to be Tracy Crow, and I am very pleased to introduce her. Give me a second here, and I will do exactly that. This is our first event of the season, by the way, so we're doubly excited on that score. Tracy is a former Marine Corps officer. She's a writer, a literary agent, and the president publisher of MilSpeak Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the creative writing endeavors from within the military community through writing workshops and a traditional publishing pathway for books authored by military veterans and family members. Tracy is a former assistant professor of journalism and creative writing and the author-editor of 6 books, including her award-winning memoir, Eyes Right, Confessions from a Woman Marine, which I believe she'll be reading from tonight, and a historical biography with co-author Jerry Bell, It's My Country Too, Women's Military Stories from the American Revolution to Afghanistan, which earned a starred review from Library Journal. Speaking of the American Revolution, I'm watching the Ken Burns documentary. I hope others are too. In addition to working as an adjunct at the online MFA, Tracy teaches in the low residency MFA program at Queens University of Charlotte in North Carolina. Currently, as a work-for-hire author, Tracy is writing the first historical biography of women in Air Force Special Forces from 1990 to 2022, which is scheduled for release in 2027 from Air University Press. She lives in Central North Carolina on 10 storybook acres with her husband, a Major League Baseball lifer, and their 3 pups, Rocky, Hope, and Fenway. So Tracy, welcome.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. Sorry for all of our little glitches and everything, but you know, it's solar flares and everything else. We'll get there. We'll all get there together. So
That's right.
I think I'm just supposed to start right in writing, or did you want to talk about anything else, Paul?
I guess the only thing I want to talk about is
reading.
I want to talk about baseball, but we can talk about that.
Let's talk. Let's talk.
No, we can talk about.
I've got all kinds of photos over here.
We can talk about that later. Why don't you go ahead and read for us? Read for us from your memoir.
Okay, I'm going to be reading you some excerpts from the memoir Eyes Right, and I took my book jacket off to help me, but this is the cover. This was published by the University of Nebraska Press and in their American Lives edition. So if you were to pick up the book and see the back jacket or to see any kind of description, what you would find out is that I joined the Marine Corps at 18 when my life was a mess, as the description says. I grew up in a family that was somewhat filled with domestic violence, and my father, sadly, was an alcoholic. So I joined the Marine Corps instead of a 12-step program. So I'm going to start reading. But my career, I will say that I left the Marine Corps after 10 years with an honorable discharge. But what I always follow up with is that I left even with an honorable discharge, but under conditions that felt far less than honorable to me. So that's where I drop you into this scene. And I know that this is nonfiction tonight. So for all the students, you're writing fiction, I know that, but be thinking maybe about how your first person point of view is working and how you're developing either a reliable or unreliable narrator through that. So since all of this is first person, okay? All right, you ready? Here we go. When I was 28, younger than my daughter is today, I was facing the likelihood of a court-martial. I followed a Marine sergeant down a polished corridor, past the clacking of typewriters and murmurs behind the closed doors of military police headquarters, and pretended to be unafraid, as if I had nothing to hide, as if on the way there that morning I hadn't seriously mapped out a plan for desertion. Inhaling and exhaling in the same forced rhythm of a runner pacing through a psychological wall, I was committed to a marathon of sorts. And so I was breathing in and breathing out, matching foot speed and cadence with the young Marine ahead of me, a machinated force we were, matching left foot and right, left arm and right, until he pulled up short in front of a closed door. My toe stubbed against the heel of his boot. Acting politely unaware, he pushed open the door and stepped aside for me to enter. He wore well his role of consummate Marine, refusing the eye contact I was desperate to interpret. "The captain will be with you shortly, ma'am," he said. I forced a smile. "Thank you, Sergeant." After he disappeared behind the closed door, I heard those machine-like limbs working their way back down the corridor. This was March 1987, the year Prozac made its debut. Gasoline was 89 cents a gallon. The cost to mail a letter just 24 cents. Televangelist Jim Baker had just self-destructed much the same way I had. So I'll move you a little bit farther ahead. I've got two narrative threads that are running through this book. One is this current present that you're reading about, where I'm in an interrogation room. And then I'll take you back through the second thread, which begins in childhood, so that by the time we get to part 3 of the book, the two threads have joined and they are now, connected. And you can hopefully understand why certain decisions were made. So the captain walks into the room. I knew this captain. Well, not knew her in the sense that we had shared anything other than salutes when passing each other in various parking lots around the air station. But I knew the woman who towered toward the dim fluorescent light on the ceiling in that interrogation room, the woman with slicked back, white blonde hair, face airy and cool and sharp as the officer in charge of military police. "At ease, warrant officer," she said, in a tone offering nothing for interpretation, her eye contact brief and hesitant. I placed my hands against the small of my back and waited while she juggled from one hand to the other a legal-sized yellow pad, a pen, and a tape recorder, placing each on the metal desk, and each object the way everything has of occupying space, further reducing the already too small room. After closing the door, she motioned for me to take a chair. I pulled from under the desk the closer of the two chairs. I don't know why. Either the decision seemed obvious or I was too intimidated to break her personal space. The padding of the seat I had chosen, however, was ripped. I sat, and when I raised my right leg to cross it over my left knee, the upturned tear of fabric jabbed into a muscle and tugged at my stocking so that I had no choice but to lower my foot back to the floor. The captain pulled out the second chair. The seat was not ripped. "Good morning, warrant officer," she said, sitting. "Good morning, ma'am." She popped open the compartment of the cassette recorder, apparently satisfied to find a tape. She closed the compartment and then, sliding the machine across the desk, she seemingly divided the room into her half and my half. "So, how are you doing, Tracy? How are you holding up?" The sound of my first name reverberated throughout the room. I could count on both hands the number of times in 10 years a military officer had spoken my first name. Each time had been a deliberate attempt at intimacy. Something like hope was beginning to course through my veins. "I'm okay, ma'am, given the circumstances." She had been scribbling across the top of the legal pad the way you do when your pen seems out of ink, but suddenly stopped and looked up. She smiled with the ease of an ally. Then, reaching across her half of the desk to turn on the tape recorder, she said, in a voice louder than I thought necessary, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Do you understand?" I nodded, forgetting the tape recorder. She pointed to the machine. I leaned closer. "Yes, ma'am." And just like that, While outside, Marines collected litter from around the parking lot of military police headquarters, while 2 blocks away at my own office, my public affairs staff, my former staff, debated, even argued over the front page photograph for the upcoming newspaper, while my husband Tom half-heartedly inspected ammunition bunkers as a distraction until my phone call, while our 6-year-old daughter Morgan, warmly tucked inside an overly bright and cheerful first-grade classroom, practiced simple addition or finger painted, the interrogation procedure regarding charges against me for conduct unbecoming an officer was finally underway. So now I'll move you quite a ways forward out of the interrogation room, and I'll give you a little sliver of the second thread. I was born with the sort of dark hair that turns the burnt reddish shade you see on old junkyard dogs during the summer. I was born with the green eyes of my Scottish ancestry. What I wasn't born was a leader. I wasn't born a college professor, a wife, a mother, or a Marine for that matter, any more than my father was born an alcoholic, although everyone who knew him claimed he was a born salesman. One summer night, when I was about 11, the escalation of voices from our living room coaxed me from the book I was reading in my bedroom. I slid in socks across my mother's waxed hardwood hallway toward the conversation in time to hear my father tell the door-to-door encyclopedia salesman that the problem with the pitch was that the salesman didn't know when to stop talking. A good salesman, my father was lecturing, knows when to shut up and hand the customer a pen. The exaggerated enthusiasm on the salesman's face quickly faded as if my father had taken one of my big fat erasers to it. The salesman opened his briefcase, gathered his colored brochures from our coffee table, unaware that in 3 weeks my father would call him to order the encyclopedias as a Christmas present for my younger brother and me. The only thing a salesman's got is his product, Dad was saying, as the salesman hurried for the door. You have to believe in what you're selling. Believe in what you're selling. Fake it until you make it. These were the mantras I carried with me throughout my 20s. Throughout that decade, I was a Marine. So maybe my father had been born a salesman. What I know for certain is that father and daughter seemed born with a relentless drive to prove something to themselves, maybe to the world. My father eventually drank away his drive, and his dreams soon dematerialized. I think we're still okay on time because I timed this before I put all this together today. But Paul, shout anytime you need to. So now I'm taking you back into the interrogation room. I hope you're all still with me. In the interrogation room, the captain asked, "You're the public affairs officer for the New River Air Station, is that correct?" "No, ma'am." I was being technical, literal, perhaps even a bit coy. The space between her eyes narrowed, squeezing out 2 military straight parallel lines. "Okay, until you were relieved from duty 2 weeks ago, is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." Her face relaxed, but I could still make out the shadows of those lines that seemed ready to spring forward when ordered. "Are you married?" "Yes, ma'am." "Not divorced?" She was scribbling again on her legal pad, setting up her case for adultery. "No, ma'am." She leaned over the desk and peered at the tape recorder. "Are you and your husband separated?" "No." "No?" There were those parallel lines again. "Are you sure about that?" "Well, we weren't as of this morning, ma'am." And this turn of curtness or smugness brought her full attention. My cheeks began to warm under a stare intent on locating a lie. But it wasn't a lie. Just a few hours earlier, and under a mental cloud of scheming to make a run for Canada, I had walked Tom and our 6-year-old to the car. He had insisted that morning on driving Morgan to school. She was climbing into the back seat with her usual cheerfulness, and I was inhaling the sweet cloud of baby shampoo and minty toothpaste as I pulled the seat belt across her chest. "Will you meet me at the bus stop today?" she asked. This had been the same question every day throughout my 2 weeks on house arrest. Our first grader, after sampling life with a regular mom rather than with a Marine mom, had decided which of the two she preferred. It was easy to understand why Morgan liked being one of those kids who went home rather than to daycare after school. Who wouldn't prefer a mom who was waiting for her at the bus stop, a mom who had an after-school snack prepared, a mom never too tired and grouchy to help with homework? I'm skipping you forward. All this I could have offered as evidence to the captain in her tape recorder, But I said nothing, remembering my father's veteran sales advice to the poor novice encyclopedia salesman, you have to know when to stop talking. But the captain eventually broke her silence, and I felt the tiniest bit victorious. Have you ever been separated, a marital separation? Yes, ma'am. When was that? Last summer. She inched the tape recorder toward me. Why did you and your husband separate last summer? I glanced out the window, my gaze falling on the white, blooming dogwood I was noticing for the first time, thinking how I could have been an hour closer to Canada. By my calculations that morning on the drive through Jacksonville, North Carolina, passing the liquor stores and tattoo parlors, discount furniture businesses, and used car dealerships, I figured I could put at least 3 states in the rearview mirror before phone calls exhausted theories of whether or not I had been injured in a car crash on the way to the interrogation, or kidnapped by gypsies while pumping gas, or pistol whipped during a carjacking and wandering around with amnesia. A 3-state head start would have been quite advantageous for a woman intent on deserting her military life, her husband, even her 6-year-old daughter. I had also wanted to escape from the reporters who were calling our home nearly every day for 2 weeks, reporters with promises to air my side of the story first in exchange for an exclusive. If reporters wanted headlines, I suppose a run to Canada would satisfy 2 possibilities. Woman Marine officer missing. Replaced a few hours later, woman Marine officer flees. Instead, I had turned around in the parking lot of an abandoned gas station, my tires crunching across gravel between 2 deserted islands of gas pumps. The sign on the door read, "We're closed, please come again." The captain had taken to tapping her ink pen on the metal desk. I wondered how those reverberations would play to those later who would be listening to the tape. In my head, I played out one answer and quickly discarded it for another. She was off track with her line of questioning. What had happened between General John Hopkins and me had nothing to do with why Tom and I separated the summer before, though I suspect her orders were to see how tightly she could tie the 2 together. And then there's one more very short scene that I'll share with you. It'll be the last one. I was 11, the first time I fell in love with a general. On a Thursday night in 1970, a night when my brother was in the hospital recovering from a hernia operation and my mother was staying the night with him, my father took me to see the movie he said everyone was talking about. Here's how I remember it. Shh. Sorry, the dogs are barking. George C. Scott, as General Patton in Army uniform, steps onto the stage, salutes. In the background, an enormous American flag. We are watching him hold the salute through a trumpet call for reveille. The camera cuts. Cut. There's the baseball lifer issuing
That
the
was
doghouse.
amazing.
Okay. So I'm almost done. Just another minute. So we're watching him hold the salute. So in the background, there's this enormous flag. If you've seen Patton, the movie Patton, you know the scene I'm talking about. The camera cuts to an ivory-handled pistol, the helmet with 4 stars, a baton, rows of medals, that pinky ring. My father's munching popcorn, drinking a Coke. Patton, or rather Scott as Patton, is addressing a class of recruits who would soon leave to join the fight against the Nazis. We never see the recruits, but sitting there in the dark theater next to my father, I felt strangely like one of them. The good girl who followed the rules to keep from sparking war within her family. At the beginning of Patton, Scott delivers his famous monologue about sacrifice and bravery. My father was shaking the tub of popcorn at me as I reached for another buttery handful. On the screen, General Patton began swearing in that voice that reminded me of tires grinding along a gravel driveway, and I pulled my hand back. You win a war by letting some other poor bastard die for his country. When the general finished, I reached for more popcorn and glanced up at my father. Underneath the fragments of moving shadows that played across his face was an odd and unfamiliar expression. I suddenly had the feeling I was sitting next to a stranger, helping myself to his popcorn. What about war and killing and sacrifice and honor among men did my father wish to share with me? In the dark theater that night watching Patton, my father felt too far away from the life that included my mother, brother, and me. He had locked himself inside a private chamber within his mind. What was he learning there? What was he questioning? under life's most difficult conditions, would I? Could I? What? Retreat? Desert? Hold your ground? Be brave? Jump on the grenade to save the others? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all these thoughts were only firing into me. And I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thank
I
you
haven't
so
read that in a
much.
long, long time.
No, that was great. Just so beautiful and powerful stuff.
Thank you.
And I especially appreciated the four-legged visitor that came in.
I warned you earlier that I had a new puppy, and she just barrels right through.
I don't know if anyone else thought of this immediately, but it just reminded me of that COVID video where that guy was doing the very important meeting. And the meeting, this little kids came in, and then the mom ran in and grabbed them.
Grabs them.
It was perfect. I loved it. So thank you.
I'm just glad my husband was actually fully clothed.
Hey, I hate to interrupt, but can you hear me and see me?
All the time, so I'm just glad he was fully clothed.
Yeah, Dan, we can hear you and see you.
Thank God, Jesus. Okay, and
Yes,
Moses and all of them.
Okay, made it. So yeah, we'll get to you in just a second, Dan. We just
No problem.
Yep.
Oh,
So thank
thanks,
you,
Raymond.
Tracy, for reading. It was a wonderful. Paul, did you have something that you wanted to add real quick before we kicked it over to Dan?
No, not really. I mean, I just want to say that it was it's a memoir that's focused on your experiences in the Marine Corps, obviously, but it seems like so much more than that. You know, it's really a family saga in a lot of ways. From what I gathered from what you were reading, just beautifully done. I mean, while later go through the chat and you'll see some of the comments you were receiving. And of course, once Dan is finished, we'll bring you back on and we'll have a Q&A and talk a lot more about your book and answer questions from the audience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob so he can introduce Dan.
Right. And thank you again, Tracy. It was fantastic.
Welcome.
Really appreciated hearing it. And Dan, thank you. I know you were there were some technical issues and everything. I think if you just hit the unmute button, you're all set now. I'm going to introduce you and then and turn it over to you. So Dan Gleason is a graduate of the University of Iowa's program in creative writing, perhaps better known as the Iowa Writers Workshop, a prolific magazine writer whose fiction and nonfiction has appeared regularly in major publications that include Esquire, the New York Times, the Atlantic Magazine, Sports Illustrated, Vanity Fair, and many others. Dan has also sold 2 nonfiction books and 1 novel, and has recently finished his 2nd novel. His latest publication, the true crime book Life Without, just out from Bloomsbury, tells the story of Sandy Shaw, who spent 21 years in prison for a murder she did not commit, and is based on hundreds of hours of interviews with Miss Shaw. Dan's writing awards include the Georgia State Bar Association's Indigent Defense Journalism Award, the Golf Writers Association of America Best Magazine Article of the Year 2 times, and a runner-up Big Apple Film Festival Screenplay Competition 2021. Dan has been an instructor for SNU's online master's program here since 2015. Welcome so much, Dan. I'm glad you're here. I'm thankful that we're all set with the camera and mics now. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. I went out and logged in like 4 times. I'm a technological nitwit. I don't, but it was. I got it. Here I am. So great to see all the faces here, and I recognize some of the people like Max Fraser, who was my team lead in my last class, and a great one too. So let me get into this, and I'll tell you, I'm going to explain some things because so much happened in this girl's life that I can only read from 1 chapter. I'm going to read you the chapter of the murder that she was wrongly convicted of. So let me explain just a couple of minutes. And by the way, the problem I had with logging in, I missed a lot of Tracy's. I wanted to hear her stuff, so maybe there'll be a recording. Every time I would have to log in again, I lose where I was. So, any case, I found out about this story because the Atlanta Braves were rained out one day, and I always went to true crime, so I turned on to true crime. There was an HBO documentary called Gladiator Days: Anatomy of a Prison Murder, And it was about the guy who did the murder that got her wrongly convicted, who was a friend of hers. So I'll tell you how I did this in first person. I started it as a third person reporter voice, and then I just said, I'm going to do it first person and pretend I'm Sandy. And I did all the writing, but she furnished me the information. But I've known her for 20 years now. I think 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. And so I knew her story backwards, and that was helpful. So I start the book in the when she's in a pardons hearing with the Nevada Supreme Court and the governor, and I only flashback once. I don't like flashbacks. I try to tell all my students, don't do it. It stops the forward motion of your story. But one flashback or two flashbacks isn't bad. I go back while she's waiting. I go back. I have her think of thoughts from when she's 3 years old, because she's waiting for the Supreme Court members and Pardons Board members to get ready and shuffle papers. And so then I go from there all the way through her life until she's back in that courtroom, and I end it with her pardons hearing and with the judges making a decision. So with that, I adopted the first person, and it really worked well for me. And so when she had a dysfunctional life. Her mother was not the most monogamous woman, and her husband was a guy that beat her up, and he'd been raped by a priest when he was a kid, and he was in many battles in Vietnam and almost died. So he came back with post-traumatic stress disorder, and when the whiskey bottle let him down, he started beating on his wife. So they got separated, and Sandy was kidnapped 4 times back and forth between her parents. And still, all this stuff happened when she was 13 years old. She was an honor student, cheerleader, popular girl in school, and her best friend was a little rich girl in Las Vegas whose father had developed Circus and Caesar's Palace, so they had a lot of money. So she was she was living a little rich girl's life with the gal. But they go to a sleepover one night, and the little girl's stepfather was being divorced by the little girl's mother and the little friend, and he decided he was going to kill everybody in that house. And he commenced to start doing it. Killed one right next to Sandy, her brains and blood matter all over. He's got the gun in her face. She screams. He runs out to finish off his wife. She and the other little girl hide for about an hour in that house and just terrified. Somehow, finally, Sandy got the phone down. They got the cops there. They snuck out. The guy shot himself. But the post-traumatic stress disorder, and Tracy will know about this, psychotic intrusions, because so many soldiers, psychotic intrusion is when you see a movie in front of your eyes and you think it's real, and it's the battle going on. It's a recurrence of what happened to you. So she was in class, and one day she's sitting there at her desk, and the guy that killed himself, the murderer from that house, came up and pointed a gun in her face. That's what she saw. She jumped up, ran out, never went back to school again. And she was she quit hanging out with her popular friends and so forth. They self-medicate with people who could get the drugs and liquor. So then we go forward to when she got in trouble. At 15 years old, there's a 24-year-old man stalking her. He won't stop. The police can't do anything because in 1986, when this happened, there were no stalking laws on the books. So she didn't know what to do. She asked a friend to help her, a rough and tumble kid she grew up with who was a neighborhood protector. He said, I'll kick his ass and that'll be it. And so he said, I won't do this out in public, so you got to lure him. You got to actually accept a date for this guy you're terrified with to get him out to the desert. So she did, and then then the bad stuff happened. So I'm gonna read from that chapter, and this is a murder. And the guy's name was James Cotton Kelly, and they found out later after he was killed that he was actually James Cotton Theed, and his parents were he and his parents were drug smugglers. And the prosecutor, who is the antagonist by far of this story, who got people to lie on the stand and so forth, he hid that information from the jury. He wanted to make them think that this guy was a Canadian version of the All-American Boy. So here we go. It was Monday, September 29th, 1986. A pleasant early fall day where the sun bathed the streets on my block bright orange. Then a cold front came through just before sunset. As darkness fell, I opened the front door partway to slip out unnoticed, about to meet a man on what would tragically be the last night of his life. Mom spotted me and called out from the living room, "Hey, where are you headed?" "Mini Mart, Mom. Get some snacks and stuff, maybe hook up with a friend a while." "Young lady," she called back, "you be back here no later than 8:30 and I mean it. You got to sit for Shane and your sisters, because Mike and I got tickets to see Hank Jr. at the Sahara." It was nearing 7 and already dark. "Yeah, Mom, I know. I'll be back. I promise." As I gazed up at the fading crescent moon, I took a breath that sort of hiccuped, like 1,000 butterflies had just been turned loose in my stomach. I was nervous. I was hesitant. I was scared. And now I stood staring down the spooky dark street for a pair of car lights that part of me hoped would not appear. Couldn't he just forget about me and bother somebody else? I twirled my purse around, trying to seem calm and cool so Cotton wouldn't think something was up. My right hand was heavily bandaged with tape and gauze. I had injured it the night before, accidentally but conveniently punctured it on a hanging nail while bouncing it around a friend's Jeep. Suddenly, I spotted Cotton's 1984 white Chrysler convertible closing in, illuminated, in and out, under streetlights, moving slowly, like some prowling cat. I sucked in a big breath and walked in his directions. I had warned him not to pick me up in front of my mom's house. Mom would have chased him off with whatever hammer or saw or knife was handy, because she was hopping mad he had been harassing me for over a month. And now he was about to pick me up. Troy was about to beat him up for what he had done. It's not what I had wanted, but it had come to that. When I got in his car, my heart was slamming against my rib cage, and so hard I wondered if he could hear it. He wore a clean white T-shirt with a gold Corona beer logo, jeans, and white sneakers. He was chatty and upbeat and had a suggestion. "I got a new stereo. We should go to my apartment, listen to music, order a pizza." Now, remember, this man is 24 and she is 15. "Oh, no, you don't. You agreed we'd go to a public place. That was our deal." I showed him my bandaged hand. "Cut it bad on a nail. We got to go meet up with my friend first, okay? This guy Troy, he's got antibiotics. I can't let this get infected because, well, we don't have money to go to the doctor." "Yeah, okay," he sighed. "Where?" "Circle K, not far away. I'll show you the turns." He drove past the Circle K on Jones Boulevard, and my stomach tumbled because Troy was nowhere in sight. Jesus, did he blow me off? And if so, now what? I was panicked that Cotton might take me to some out-of-the-way place and rape me. I suddenly wished I'd never set the plan in motion. Where the hell was Troy? I stalled for a time. I talked Cotton into circling the block twice more, and on the second loop, thank God, there was Troy under a streetlight, waving when he spotted me, holding a half-empty bottle of whiskey, and somebody was with him, somebody I never knew. Cotton pulled to the curb, but there was a surprise waiting. He wasn't alone. The guy with him was about Troy's age, some beanpole who towered over 5'10" Troy, maybe 6'5". A half-empty bottle of Southern Comfort dangled from his hand. Both he and Troy were dressed in black leather jackets and black leather gloves, their barrel rolls from anxiety because they looked like they were in costume for a masquerade party as matching burglars. They got in the car. I turned around and said to Billy, his name Billy Merritt, "Hi, Billy, I'm Sandy." "Yeah, I figured that out." I stared into his cold eyes and got the willies. He had a long, thin face that framed a pair of cold, dark, sunken eyes under high cheekbones. I suddenly pictured a bony-faced Charles Manson. Cotton pulled away from the curb, and off we went down Jones Boulevard to supposedly get medicine from Troy's mother. "Just in and out. Medicine's at Ma's," Troy assured him. "Just up the road a bit." "I'll run in and grab it." "Sure thing," Cotton said. Troy directed him on a few turns, and soon we were headed east on Russell Street, a desolate stretch of road framed by desert. Not a single house or living thing out there, but a lizard. Then Billy pushed his knee hard into my seat back, the agreed signal Troy and I had worked out. "Hey, would you pretty please pull over?" I begged. "I got to pee real bad." Cotton obliged, pulling off the road a few yards into open space surrounded by scrub brush. I got out and walked south in the direction back toward town because that's where I was going. I wasn't going to see any fight. I didn't want to see any violence. I was going to go back there and wait for them. Now Troy just needed to do his thing, maybe with a little help from the Beanpole guy, the Charlie Manson guy, and my life would be back to whatever version of normal it had been. Well, I get maybe 50 yards when Billy came trotting out. Hey, Sandy, hold on a second. I spun around, wondering what the hell. Troy and Cotton were standing outside the car, chatting away like they were old buddies. What? I asked. Pretend you hurt your leg, Billy said. My leg? What for? Because I need to get Troy out here and talk. Let's just forget this, I said. I don't want you guys to beat him up. Let's just all go home. But I'll ride home from the mini mart with you guys because I don't trust Cotton. But Billy didn't seem to be hearing what I was saying. He yelled at Troy, "Come out here, Troy. Sandy hurt her leg." Troy ran after us, and after a few seconds, Cotton followed in a fast trot. I plopped down on a huge rock, doing like Billy ordered me, rubbing my ankle and wincing. I'm thinking, okay, they aren't going to fight. I'm just going to call this thing off and just go home. Just then, Cotton reached out and grabbed my left arm to pull me up like a nice guy. And then a loud pistol shot barked right next to my ear. I was pushed to the ground again. What the hell? I didn't see who fired it, but I sure as hell knew the sound of a pistol by now. Billy called out, "Get him now, Troy, get him now." Then bam, bam, bam. There were more shots. My instinct kicked in. Scared out of my wits, I jumped up off the ground and bolted. My mind raced as I sprinted away toward the car, thinking I was going to get shot too. Memories of that Rancho Circle murder 2 years ago flashed through my mind as time sped up into fast motion. I wasn't sure I really knew where I was at that point. I kept crying out, "I'm going to be sick." Billy, right behind me now, yelled, "Don't worry about it. You'll be okay. You're going home now. This guy's dead." Jesus Christ, Jesus H. Christ, I said. Those were the only words I could choke out of my throat. I'm going to be sick. It started to come clear. What in God's name just happened, and what had I got myself into? I glanced back, saw Cotton's body, flat on the ground, not moving. Cotton, Jesus, he's dead. Half crying, I yelled, "What did you just do, Troy?" Troy was just a few yards behind me now, but he wouldn't answer. "Damn it, Troy, God damn it, why did you shoot him? Where'd you get that gun?" I hadn't seen no gun, but I clearly heard it. Where was it? Did he ditch it? Troy wouldn't answer, just shrugged and looked blankly at his shoes. At the car, Troy grumbled when they opened the driver's side door. "Ah, shit, damn keys are in his pocket. Sandy, you go out and get them." "Screw you," I said. "No way I'm going out and get no dead guy's damn car keys." "Whatever," Troy shrugged. Both of them then jogged back to Cotton's body, and it suddenly hit me. I'm a witness. Shit. They're going to kill me too. Maybe Troy won't, but I don't know about this Billy guy. I took off towards some brushes and ducked down, out of sight. Soon enough, Billy called out, "Sandy, hey, Sandy, where the fuck are you, Sandy?" There was a long pause before he called out again. Then he spooked me when he appeared right behind me like a damn vampire. "What the goddamn hell are you doing? Come on, damn it. We got to get." He pulled me up. He had hold of my arm as he walked me to the car like he thought I might run away. Billy drove and I rode in the back seat, sick to my stomach, scared out of my skin, freaked out about riding in a dead man's car. At first, nobody talked. The murder hung heavy in the air among us. All of a sudden, Billy had his wallet, and he was throwing something out. "Ain't no wallet," Billy said. "They won't know who he is." "Damn it, Troy, why did you shoot that guy?" He would never answer. I'll pull forward, but they take her home. They make her get out and get gas because they don't want to be seen, so they make her do it because they're low on gasoline. And then they take her home, and she says, and then her parents come back from the concert. She says, "I took a sleeping pill from Mom's medicine cabinet, and soon after they returned from the concert at the Sahara, I crawled into bed. Even after the pill, I tossed and turned a long time, drifting into a restless sleep, praying I'd wake to find it was all a bad dream." So that's the murder chapter. But what happened was, if she'd have gone to the police that next day, she would have been a witness. But she would have had to turn her old friend in, but she was scared because the other guy, the Charlie Manson fellow, says if you tell the cops, you'll be out there laying next to cotton in that desert. So they found out, the police, as they always do, found out about the murder, arrested all of them. And then the prosecutor, who was a very bad guy, eventually was nearly disbarred. He told he made the jury believe it was, number one, a robbery gone wrong. There was no stalking. A nice guy like Cotton Kelly would never do that. And everything he told the jury, they believed it because Sandy ended up with a lawyer who had never tried a criminal case in his life. He was a real estate lawyer, never lost a case, but all real estate stuff. He didn't know how to object in court, so it was pretty bad. And then they, after all this, he had 2 or 3 witnesses that lied because they were intimidated to do so by the prosecutor. And so Sandy was convicted of life without parole and not given any kind of post conviction hearing, which they're supposed to get. And they sentenced her to life without, the judge brought her down at 2 o'clock in the morning and sentenced her to life without parole. At least they should have given her a pre-sentence and post-sentence hearing because of that, what she saw when she was 13. And it is also against the law, was then, still is, for a 15-year-old, 15 at the time of the crime, to be sentenced to life without parole. But nobody seemed to care. Once you're in the prison, you're done. I mean, you're in there and nobody knows you're there. Nobody cares you're there. And she spent 21 years in there. And at 15, she had to fight off predators. You can imagine, she was a cute girl, good-looking girl, and she's in this prison with all these predators. But she made the most of her life. She got 2 college degrees in there. She got her act together. She tried to be the best person she could be, and finally got out at the age of 37. Then they put her on parole for 15 years. It was supposed to be lifetime parole, but I kept urging her, get to the pardons board, get your case there, fill out paperwork. And I helped her fill out the paperwork, sent stuff, and a couple of Supreme Court justices got her on the docket, and she was pardoned, fully pardoned. Sentence, crime was exonerated, taken off the books, and they apologized to her. Well, she's 51 years old at that point. So that's the story.
Thank you so much, Dan. I mean, as people say in the chat, it's horrifying. It's shocking. It's often with like a lot of true crime works and stuff. It shines a light on a justice system that is not very just for some folks and stuff. And I think there are so many stories out there, I think, of varying degrees of people who have been imprisoned, wrongfully imprisoned, and are exonerated only many years later. And to just imagine having to be in a prison system for that long or on probation for that long for something that one didn't actually commit is horrifying. And this is something, I guess this is an interesting aspect to it. I was thinking as you were reading and stuff, this is actually our first event where we had someone who has the book that it's co-written in a way, because Sandy is telling you this account and you're transcribing it for the audience. So
well, sort of. I didn't have to transcribe. I mean, because I was talking to her. Remember this? I was talking to her for damn near 20 years.
Damn near 20 years. I mean, and you can. I think that someone had pointed that out actually in the chat too. Like the attention to the dialogue in the age of this particular character shows that you know her for so long and so well, where you can create the character on the page that kind of shows that naivete of what to do next. And because of making those choices that didn't, she didn't go to the police the day after because she didn't want to turn in her friend and stuff like that. It ended up snowballing and creating this horrible event. So, these types of stories are important, obviously, to share, as are yours, Tracy, which is a completely different.
It's hers with injustice too.
Yeah, well, we were. It's quite interesting to see the juxtaposition or the differences between the 2 pieces and stuff, and how they were read tonight. So, Tracy, I do see that you're on camera, and Paul, you are as well. And we're going to move into our Q&A section for the night. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, please don't hesitate to post.
Can I just make one quick statement?
Absolutely. Yes.
When I decided to help her, I had no idea she was innocent. I just figured she did not get a fair trial, and that's all we're guaranteed. But we're guaranteed that by our Constitution, and a lot of times it doesn't happen. I knew a guy named Bobby Lee Cook, who was a legend in the South and had a deep drawl and all that. He was a criminal attorney. He told me, I was doing a piece, and he said, Mr. Gleason, he said, you get a capital crime, you're going to get all the justice you can afford and not a penny more. So that's you better have money if you tried for a capital crime.
That seems to be the theme that I have seen as well. I was thinking of other pieces, literature pieces and stuff that have been created on this. And one that stuck out to me was the play The Exonerated. Came out, I think, turn of the century, actually, 2000. There was just a bunch of, characters on stage talking about how eventually they were exonerated for crimes that they did not commit. And to read them back to back and stuff is shocking and insightful too. So thank you so much for sharing Sandy's
you bet
story with us. Hey, folks, if you want to ask any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to throw it back over to Paul for now and have you ask our first question, and I'll monitor the chat and we'll go from there. Oh, and as an FYI, for those who may have showed up a little late, we had a couple of technical issues at the beginning of our thing, so we started a little bit later. So we're going to stay until around 9:18, 9:20. So please do stick around, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them, and we'll try to get to them. All right, Paul, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Yeah, I'm going to get us started with a question, maybe for each of our two guests tonight. I'll start with one for Tracy. So Tracy, I want to talk about the act of writing a memoir, I guess. It's in a way, it's a bit of a balancing act between privacy and revelation. And for Eyes Right, how did you decide where to draw that line? And how has your understanding of that line changed as you've grown and evolved as a writer? And I'm kind of thinking also of your writing guide, a guide to writing the military story, where I think you probably also have to think a lot about that line between privacy and revelation.
I started off with a couple of theories. One basically handed to me from grad school, which was you own your story. And so you have a right to tell your story. But I also grew up in military public affairs, so that meant I knew a little bit about libel law. So you can write pretty much as you wish and include people as you wish when they are a public figure, but when they are a private citizen, you do have to respect that they have a right to privacy. So I joke often that I left out enough of this memoir that I could have written another book for that very reason. And I changed the names of some people. I did not. I changed the name of my husband, who later became my ex-husband, but not the name of my daughter, because she was okay with that. I changed the name of other people, that were in there, because they also had a right to privacy. I did not change the name of the general, John Hopkins, because he had died. And so they don't have a right to privacy. So I did have to be concerned about those things. But I also let the first draft be what the first draft needed to be. I got as much as I possibly could out on that first draft. So in terms of revelation, I would say not a whole lot changed for me. And I do talk about some of this with libel in my memoir, but you have a right to your story. But you also have to remember there are no demons or angels out there. And you also have to understand that when you're writing a personal memoir, that other people are characters in your life, but they also have a right to privacy as private citizens. So you may need to change names. What you're not allowed to do, because that breaks the contract between you and the reader, in my opinion, you're not allowed to create, you're not allowed to compile and make up characters. You're not allowed to take characteristics from this one or that one and create one character because it's more convenient or something. So you do have to hold to as much truth as you possibly can recall it. I hope I answered that somewhat.
That's a great answer. I mean, of course, you can do that in fiction. You can
Love it.
combine
Yeah.
combine
Yes,
characters.
yes,
But
yes.
when you're
Yeah,
writing
otherwise,
nonfiction,
call it fiction. Yeah.
yeah. So here's a question that I have for both of you. This I'm going to pull it right out of the chat. For both authors, and maybe we can start with you, Dan, for this one. For both authors, do you know what your profound truth or universal theme is when you start writing, or do you discover it as you build your manuscript?
Well, you think you know, but you discovered. I'll give you an example. I just wrote. I was injured. I know. Jacob knows about this, but I somehow hurt my. It was a freak thing, and I couldn't actually get out and walk for 2 months. And I had a manuscript that had been sitting there for more years than I would like to share. I'd piddle with it and I'd leave it alone, go to something else. So I had 13 hours a day in the computer chair, and I started writing this story about a con man, a novel, a con man and a nerd and sadder but wiser beauty queen. And I had wonderful characters based on my hometown and all the weirdos. I grew up in a town full of weirdos, an old coal mining town. But I said this story is about revenge. If I had a theme, it's revenge. And all of a sudden, I'm maybe about halfway through it, and I said, no, the theme of this is loyalty. There's revenge in it, but this is about loyalty. Everything kept coming up. So I'm saying, yes, get a theme, but don't be tied to it. Don't ruin your story because your theme. Oh God, I got off the theme of I don't know, toe dancing or whatever it was. But let it go and just let it. People will read. Don't you think, Tracy, that readers will figure out what the theme is on their own? I don't think
Yes,
it's not important to me.
They may often have a takeaway that you never even intended.
Exactly. Somebody might tell me my story isn't about loyalty, but I think they'll see that. I hope.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. You don't want to hit your readers over the head with what you think that your story is about. And I guess that's as true in nonfiction as it is in fiction. I mean, like, really, when you come right down to it, how different are fiction and nonfiction? I mean, like, you think instinctively, you're like, well, they're completely opposite to each other, but are they really?
No. A good story is, if you don't have a good story, I don't care if it's fiction, nonfiction. The only way you can get away with writing crappy stuff is if you're writing a textbook.
And I was hoping as I was reading and remembering who some of my students who are on here, I was hoping as I was reading that students who are writing fiction were picking up on some of the craft elements. I'm always teasing them that these craft elements are going to start, jumping off the page at you as you start to identify them. You're no longer really reading for pleasure anymore as much as you are studying the craft. So I was hoping, Kara says, I saw them. I noticed them. Good job, Kara. Extra credit. Good job, Ambria. So at any rate, I was hoping that they would see the same things, that these are the same, the sensory language, the sounds, the touch, all the different feels, the smells, all of that sort of stuff. We're using the same craft. We're using the same thing. It's told, through a certain perspective, but the storytelling craft is still there. Maybe in memoir, there's a little bit, we always talk about show, don't tell, but in memoir, there's a little bit more of show and tell with that reflection. And I think if you're writing a first person point of view novel, you should maybe remember that like a memoir, it should probably have a little bit more of the show and the tell, the reflection part in there.
Good answer.
There seems to be so often where I see first person fiction, I read it and I think, oh, this actually happened to the author. Even in cases where like, oh, it's a vampire. No, he was bit by a vampire. No, but I mean, it just seems to really capture that personal aspect of it that nonfiction does as well. So excellent. Thank you. We have a lot of actually great questions that are coming in. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull another one if that's okay. So when do you know that it's ready to get published? Like how long does it usually take that to actually happen with your writing? Does that vary by project? Do you know, is there a point where you set your pen down and say, I'm finished? Or is it something that you continuously work on until, where's that threshold where you cross it and say, all right, got to send it to my agent, or got to send it out and see if I can find representation for this work?
Just for me or Tracy?
We'll start
Dan,
with Tracy and
then
we'll jump over to you, Dan.
Go ahead and start,
whatever.
Dan.
Whoever has an answer.
Flip a coin. All right, I'll go. Well, it depends on nonfiction. You got a deal. before you start. I mean, you write 40 pages and you send it to an agent, or if you already have an agent, they say, yes, I'll start sending it around, but you have to have chapter outlines. So that it applies what you said more to fiction. And I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are writers that struggle with, they say, I can't, the endings are so hard. That's easy for me. I don't know why. And even with this nonfiction thing, once I got going on it and it was all approved and money's there and I'm going on it, my agent called me and said, can you finish this in 2 weeks? I said, hell no. I mean, I was like 2 months from it. And I said, why? She said, well, I've got someone who wants to try to get a documentary off this, but they need the end. I said, let me do this. Let's take the chapter outlines and I'll add some stuff to them. And then I'll write an ending. And I figured, okay, I'll write the ending and then I'll go back to it when the book's finished and change it all because it's just going to be shit. And all of a sudden I wrote the ending. Hell, it's better than anything I could have contemplated and worked on. Maybe because I didn't think about it, I just dashed it out and it all came out. But I don't know. I think you're finished when you're finished when you think you are. I don't know how else, because I don't think there's any formula for it. I don't.
Just kind of a gut reaction.
Well, you look at your ending. It's a great ending, and I did that with the novel. I just wrote a novel while I was while I was confined, and it's called The Highwayman, and based on that old poem by Alfred Noyes, The Highwayman. Road was a ribbon of darkness across the purple moor, and the ending of it is just, I mean, it just came to me like I wasn't thinking. And I think you write when you write really well, and when you're going really well. Not if you're a good writer or not. If you're doing your best, you can't. Nothing else is going on around you. Time passes, you don't see it pass. The phone rings, you think is that a real phone? And I can tell you, a long time ago. I'll share this real quickly. I was on the typewriter days, and I had the typewriter against the wall, and I was in an apartment on a raised dining room. That's where I worked, and I had a girlfriend who had a key to the place, and I'm typing away and typing away and typing away, and I look up, and it was like a vampire. She was standing. I said, "Jesus Christ, don't come up and do that. You could give a guy a stroke." She said, "Do you know how long I've been standing here?" I said, "No, how long?" She says, "About 15 minutes. I said, "That's cool. That's what I want." Right? You get in that zone, and then you come up with stuff that you think, Jesus, that's pretty good. Did I write that? Was that me? So that's all I know about endings and whether it's ready. What do you think, Tracy?
Well, let me share this story. I left grad school in January of 2005, graduated, and I lived in Florida at the time. And the very next day, in the very next week, was Eckerd College's very first Writers in Paradise workshop. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is in my backyard. I'm an Eckerd College grad, so I'll go to this. And I encouraged several of my grad school buddies to come on down and stay at my house, and we would all go. Dennis Lehane, author of Mystic River,
he's
an
God,
Eckerd alum. So we go to this workshop, and I have got all this advice from all my instructors that said your manuscript is ready to go. You did great reading. Your book is ready to go. I thought I had a manuscript ready to go out and sell. But I went to Michael Steinberg's seminar. And Michael Steinberg, who has sadly passed, Michael Steinberg was considered like this guru of nonfiction. He's the founder of fourth genre. Everybody, whoever writes nonfiction, tries to get into fourth genre, the literary journal. It's just, the creme de la creme. And Mike did one-on-ones with us after he read an excerpt of our pieces. So it was my turn for the one-on-one. And Michael asked me one question that no one had ever asked me in the 2 years of writing the manuscript in grad school. He asked me one question, and it caused me to go back and rewrite the entire manuscript. One question. So and that was the thing that was missing. And all he said was, all I'm going to say is, I hope you've written about and explored such and such. And I suddenly realized I had not. and I had to go explore that very deep, vulnerable material. And it really, really took a lot out of me to do that, but I had to rewrite the entire manuscript. So you have to, sometimes it comes that way. Sometimes you just know. Sometimes you're under contract, like Dan talked about, where, I mean, I've written 2 books on spec. So they were already under contract, outlines, when they were done, they were done. They were, sent off to an editor, that sort of thing. But you've got to be open enough to allow what may come through and tell you. And then you've also got to be willing to go, oh my God, I can't believe I have to go rewrite this entire manuscript. How long did it take me to write it? Let me think. Actually, it only took me a couple of months to rewrite the manuscript, but it took me 8 years to place the book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why am I wowing? I sat on that story 20 years.
2 agents and all that sort
But
of stuff.
yeah, that's great.
There's a whole story to that. It happens when it's meant to happen. It happens when it's meant.
But did you know when you wrote the ending? Did you know? Okay, I this is it. When you got the ending that you wanted. Now
Yes,
it's ready.
Because I mean I knew the story, so yes. But even then, because of what Michael had me go back and work on and really instill throughout the memoir, then it actually changed some of the reflections toward the end, and it also altered how I decided to write the epilogue.
That's pretty cool.
Michael was a genius. I mean, all he did was ask me this one.
That's all it takes.
He didn't even know the answer. He said, "I don't even want to know the answer."
I mean, it definitely goes to show that every project, and for that matter, every author who writes the project has their own journey.
Yes.
I mean, that question might not be the same for everyone, right? That Tracy had, but it is something that's worth exploring and knowing also, like what you just said, Dan, you were sitting on this story for 20 years. And, I was just thinking of, I know this is fiction, but I'm not going to pronounce her name, but the book that it's like on volume 4 or something, I think, on the calculations of volume. It took 30 years for this author to write this piece, and now it's just like it's blowing up. Like people critically acclaimed everything. It's like yes, Tracy.
Let me say, as a literary agent, what I see and what I wish I didn't see, and that's too much work. That's too early. I get so many manuscripts from emerging writers that are not ready to be shown. And I can tell from page 1, and I'm like, I mean, agents and editors, we have this page 1 rule. And if it's not there on page 1, we don't have time to go to page 2 and page 3. We just don't have time. There's too much work coming in. So when it's not there, I'm like, dang it, they sent it too early. And sometimes if I'm really, really like, I can see some potential, I might read to page 50 and then I send my notes and say, come back and talk to me, when you do this or that. But the problem I see more than anything is so many eager writers who don't wait to get feedback, and they're pushing their work in the world, and it's too soon. It's not ready yet. Hasn't cultivated enough yet.
Because they're eager would-be writers. They're not eager writers. They're eager would-be writers, want to be, and probably will be. But I've got a thing. I don't revise. I don't write a draft. I revise as I go. And of course, the pitfall of that is perfectionism. But I found a way to beat perfectionism. And if anybody out there wants to email me, I'll share it with them. It's too much to explain. But I remember the first book I did was a book about the pro golf tour for Random House, and they assigned a book to me. It was nonfiction. I had a wonderful time, and turned into a great, if you're a journalist out there, you can mooch all the food and freebies and concerts and everything's free. So I was trying to finish it, and I couldn't. And I said, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I would write from about 3 in the afternoon till 4 or 5 in the morning, and watch a little Ted Turney's movie channel, and then go to bed. And I couldn't finish. I was so mad, and I'd lay down, and I'm about to go to sleep, and I woke up, and I said, I was trying to end it with the end of the season, and I said, it's December, the tents are down, the circus is gone, and the season is over, or something like that. And I jumped up and went and typed it. But that again it means that right from the inner mind, and don't try to push it, and wait till it's ready. Wait till it's ready in your inner mind. And that's probably what your people weren't doing. Tracy. Probably they were just, writing it like they thought they should write it, and they wanted feedback from you.
Yeah.
And that's not right. If you don't get it from an agent, you get feedback from other people.
I
but
wish
you
I
don't
had the
show it.
time to do that, but I don't. I mean, I always
No.
send a response to everybody, but I just don't have the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
you'd be forever.
I mean, of
And-
course, as teachers at SNHU,
Right.
both of you are giving incredible feedback to your students, right? I mean, the students that come into an MFA or an MA program.
Oh yeah, that's
they're-
different.
They're like, they may still be impatient, but at least they have the wisdom to know that they've got stuff to learn.
I think we got great students. I really do.
I'm
agree.
a little bit nervous this term because these students are so sharp and on top of everything that I don't know if I'm going to be able to help them a whole lot. This group is like they're really, really sharp. This
Take it till you make it.
They're trying to squeeze everything they can out of me. I love it.
And, I'd like to get Tracy. I'd like to get your email address if I could, because there's stuff I wanted to ask you that we don't have time. If could you give her my address? You have my email address, right, Jacob? Will you give it to her?
We'll be
Okay.
sure to share that, Dan, for sure. And
Thank you.
it's wild that we've run out of time. We had a couple of technical issues at the beginning, but I mean we were able to stick around for the whole hour and have a fascinating conversation. And I know that it could go on and on. And the closing message that you both delivered too, it is a wild one for me because it's like I know people are constantly seeking advice on like how do I become the writer, or how do I know when I'm ready, or how do I know when to get an agent and everything. And the answer often is it's just this gut feeling, and it's hard to describe what that gut feeling is, but you have to trust yourself. And you have to find a way to get there without feeling like you're writing for the sake of writing. And I noticed that especially like Paul and I edit the Penman Review, and sometimes we'll get pieces in there and you'll see it and it's like, this poem is a poem. Like it's written like a poem, right? Like it's not quite at that caliber yet and stuff. It's like you have to find that threshold or find that mountain to climb and get to it and stuff. But it really truly is a gut feeling. And for all those who came tonight and stuff, I think that's a good message to take away from this, as well as, check out these two amazing authors' works, because they're both captivating and fascinating in their own way. And I hope that
Good looking, don't forget that.
Good looking as well, of course. And I hope you are able to take a course with them as well. And because they are phenomenal instructors as well. And we're very grateful to have them here at SNU. So thank you both, Dan and Tracy, for sharing your work. I did post your... Yes, I posted your web address or websites in the chat. So for those who want to check them out, go ahead. So we're so glad you were able to join us for the first evening. Thank you again for your patience, everyone, as we kicked off this new season for Word. Two outstanding authors, two phenomenal instructors who are just representing all the talented and dedicated talent that we have in our creative writing programs here. So thank you both for joining us. We'll be back on Wednesday, December 10th. We'll have a special December Word for Word event this year. We'll welcome best-selling horror maestro Paul Tremblay. So we hope to see you there, and you stay tuned for that. It's going to come up soon, December 10th. We're only 3 weeks away, so keep an eye out for that, and we hope to see everyone there. Paul, anything else before we close out?
Not really. I just want to thank Dan and Tracy so much for reading from your work. Just outstanding, gripping, engrossing, just really amazing work, and a privilege to listen to it. So thank you.
And I would just like to say that you guys could have been anywhere tonight at doing anything, but you carved an hour or so out to be part of this literary community. And that really says a lot about who you are as writers and who you hope to become as writers. So thank you for carving out this hour for us tonight and being part of this community.
Well said.
Well said. Absolutely.
Ditto. I'll ditto that.
Also well said.
Now go back to work and do your homework.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.